What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Well, I'll tell you what, let's get started. And Mike, do you have our little date placard that you can hold up and say what today is?
Oh my God, why didn't somebody tell me?
Jeez, put them on the spot already.
Wait.
Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen, don't worry. We are professionals. We know what we're doing.
Right. You know what we're doing here?
Wait.
Today
it is the day after International Women's Day.
That's right.
It is. What is it? What are we? What?
What is today? Today is
March.
To those of you who are joining us for the first time, we apologize.
We're not usually this professional.
Usually we're way less slick than this.
Okay, so today is Wednesday, March 9th, and what is it time for?
What time is it? It's time for another Every Other Wednesday.
Success at 12? Ah, there we go. All right. Welcome to Every Other Wednesday, everyone. Stephen and Ashley are excited. We have initials EOW. And we are the three of us. There is usually a fourth. There is occasionally, there is once in a while a fourth of us, Jeff Tobe, who is not with us today because he is working. I was working this morning, but I am not this afternoon, except that I am kind of now. And I am Richard Haddon, and I ordinarily live in Jacksonville, Florida. I'm an author and a speaker, author of Contented Cows Still Give Better Milk and a few other books. And I talk about employee engagement, recruiting, and retention. And at the moment, I am in a Marriott hotel in Buffalo, New York, where I spoke this morning. I was just saying to Sanjay, he and I are geographically closer than we've been in 2 years. And speaking of Sanjay, let me introduce Sanjay. Sanjay, please introduce yourself. I just said I would do it, but now I want you to do it.
I would rather you do it, but I'll try and do it. My name is Sanjay Knapp, and I am just an hour outside of Buffalo, New York. I live in Oakville, Ontario, which is just near Toronto. I am a speaker and author, and I specialize in performance and leadership, best known by a brand or a trademark called the 10-80-10 principle. Mr. Kerr.
Thank you, Sanjay. My name is Michael Kerr. I'm coming to you from beautiful, spectacular Canmore, Alberta in the Canadian Rockies, right next to Banff National Park. It is a stunning but cold day here today. Beautiful blue sky here today. I speak on inspiring, rocking workplace cultures. I'm the author of 8 books, including Hire, Inspire, and Fuel Their Fire, The Jerk-Free Workplace, and The Humor Advantage, Why Some Businesses Are Laughing All the Way to the Bank. And I'm excited to be here, and I'm excited that you're here. And it is, because it's March 9th, it is official Organize Your Home Office Day. Discover what your name means today. Get Over It Day, Registered Dietitian Day, and Barbie Day. So there you go.
And of those, Mike, which one are you most likely to celebrate?
Probably
Barbie.
Organize Your Home Office.
Yeah, I was thinking Barbie,
and Barbie.
Yeah,
I can combine the two.
We did not pre-announce what today's topic is, so why don't we announce it right now? Today's topic is, everyone ready? This is about the learning organization, about the culture of a learning organization. And the first thing I want to say is, what have we learned today? Well, I've just learned today that it is all those different kinds of days. And I think, we've all learned something a little bit today. But seriously, not really all that seriously, but we do want to talk about what a learning organization means, talk about some great examples of learning organizations, what that looks like, and most of all, because we know we can always count on our fabulous audience, what is a learning organization to you, and what are some examples of learning organizations that you currently work with or might have in the past?
Mm-hmm. And I also want us to talk about, Richard, things that we do, sometimes maybe inadvertently without knowing it, things that we do that counter our idea of wanting to be considered a continuous improvement organization, and yet our behaviors, our actions don't always align with our words.
Growing up, I remember many a time where I was super busy, and it was an extracurricular activity and homework and this, that, the other thing, and it was just busy. And that one day where I had like 3 lines of homework to do and no meetings, and I had all the time in the world. And what would happen is I would go home and thinking, I'll just watch a little TV, I'll talk on the phone, I'll do whatever. And the next thing you know, it's the next school day morning, and I didn't even have time to do that 3 minutes of homework that I was supposed to do. And I think that is exactly what happens with with learning within organizations. And that is, if we don't fill our time with sort of higher priority items, if you're familiar with the Stephen Covey's quadrant 2 activities, which is the non-urgent important activities, if you don't fill your time with that, other people will fill it with their quadrant 1 activities or their urgent activities. So if you don't purposely look to implement learning within the organization, formally or informally, we're giving people an opportunity to grow and be enriched, then they're going to be filled with junk. And so I think that purposefulness is one of the most important ideas in implementing something like this.
Yeah, I agree. We've got to be intentional. Let's back up for a moment, though, gentlemen. Why do you think it matters that you consider yourself, that you nurture this culture of continuous improvement and learning and development and growth? And I hate to say this cliche phrase, but we've been saying a lot the last year or so. Does it matter now more than ever to create a learning and developing kind of organization?
Just because you started with cliches, let me throw this one in. You know, the old, why should I train my employees if I just train them to leave? And the response is, well, the worst thing than that is if you don't train them and they stay.
Yeah. Well, and that I think we have to talk about, does a learning organization necessarily mean training? Does it mean training in a formal sense, in an informal sense, or are there other kinds of learning that go on that you really couldn't, even by any stretch, put into the category of training? What do you think?
Oh, absolutely. It's the formal. I mean, and you're right. We tend to default to the formal kind of training things that we do, but it's so much more than that. I think it's instilling a mindset in people. It's coaching and mentoring. It's looking for opportunities for employees to grow within their jobs, to maybe experience other positions and step into other shoes. It can be everything from creating a book club in your organization and doing all sorts of creative things. And also, I might add, fun things that encourage people to keep learning and to be curious about their job, right? To be curious about their own job, but also, especially if you want to rock it in your organization, curious about your organization, curious about your organization's goals, about your customers' needs, curious about what it is, what you need to do to really make it better and have that continuous improvement mindset where you're constantly looking for those 1% improvements.
Yeah, I've heard it said that somebody said, oh, well, if you're going to be a good leader, you have to really be smart and know a lot of stuff. And I heard someone counter that by that and say, a good leader is not the person who knows the most, it's the person who wants to know the most. Mm-hmm. So maybe it's the most curious person. I love this idea of a curious person, but also a curious organization, and fostering that culture of curiosity. What can we find out so that we can do a better job for everybody?
And not only knowing the most, it is knowing where to find out the most. So, and the fact that if I had a friend that used to say that all the time, he used to go, the most powerful people in the world are librarians. This was pre-internet. And so, because they knew where to get information, and that's what you want is know where to get the information, but more importantly, know that by having that information and sharing it, the impact you have on others. So I was recently working with an organization, and there was a takeover, or a new owner was coming in, and the current manager was toxic, good worker, but frumpy. Crossing his, they don't pay us to do this, and they don't pay us enough to do that, and all this sort of thing. But this manager had institutional history. He'd been there longer than anyone else. And I would call him, I often use this term, the Anakin Skywalker syndrome. ASS is the acronym. And so what happens is this person can go either way. They can become a powerful Jedi, or they can also become, Darth Vader. And so this is, when I was actually talking to him, and I was expressing that to him, saying, look, you know the job inside out, but what you forget is people look up to you. When they come in here and they know how long you've been here and they know how much you know, if you have the information, but you're a jerk about disseminating it, or you're frumpy while doing it, then you're sharing, you're training them, and you're creating a culture of, oh, it's okay, as long as you know everything, to have a bad attitude. And so I think that, again, just having that information isn't enough. How are you sharing it? The most powerful educators are not necessarily the best teachers, but they're the ones who are willing to share. I've had the opportunity to work in a lot of educational settings, and I've seen so many teachers that do this. They go, "This is my lesson plans. I created them. It took me 30 years to come up with them. You're brand new. Figure it out yourself." And they think that that makes them irreplaceable. But the truly irreplaceable educators are the ones that go, "Hey, you're brand new. It took me 30 years to come up with this. You add your 30 years and think how much further ahead we're going to be as an educational institution," right? So they've created a floor for people to build on, as opposed to something that everyone's reaching for and it's a plateau.
Well, and Sanjay, that happens in all sorts of organizations, right? We talk about this phenomenon of organizational silence, where employees don't speak up, or they're scared to suggest ideas or ask challenging questions. And part of that is created when there's a communication vacuum, when people are hoarding information, like you said with that frumpy. I've never heard somebody use
That's a great word, yeah.
Frumpy. I've never heard it in that context. Frumpy people hoarding information and keeping it to themselves because they perceive that's a way of retaining power, of retaining control, right? And I think it often comes from a place of insecurity.
Yeah, and then a place of what's the word of opposite of abundance? Scarcity. It's from a place of scarcity. It's what it is. And that's what people are afraid, right? They're afraid that they're replaceable. They're afraid of this, and it's what is it? The old saying. Act irreplaceable and you'll move on. Be irreplaceable and you move up.
Yeah. Sanjay, you need to start drinking coffee. There are some interesting comments there's always interesting comments in the chat, right? I want to bring some of this in. Stephen Rayfield, our good friend, I love this. Stephen says there is wisdom, learning, sharing wisdom with others in the company. So I think what Stephen is saying is learning is not only sharing information or sharing facts, it's sharing wisdom. So that's something that companies need to be open to. Brian Walker, the healthiest organizations are consistently training. Yvette Sturge, who, by the way, was reticent to share with us her middle name, which has just really caused our imaginations to run wild. Yvette says, our president is a mastermind of learning. I presume you mean the president of your organization. You have a conversation with him, and it is not until the end of the conversation that you realize he is leading you to finding answers to what you needed and how it connects to your company and your goals. I love that. So
he's like Yoda, really.
Yeah. Kind of a Socratic method, and I think that works so much better. Yeah.
So, gentlemen, let's go back to this notion of curiosity. What are some ways we foster a culture of curiosity, if that's a key driver here?
Well, isn't it the same way that you foster almost anything? You provide incentives for it, and it doesn't have to be. I don't mean we're paying people to be curious, but it has to be in people's best interests to exhibit curiosity. And in some cultures, it is definitely not in your best interest to exhibit curiosity. You shouldn't ask questions. You shouldn't question the status quo. You should just go with the line. And so I think if we talk about culture and how culture plays out in terms of organizational behavior and things that we can actually see, I think an organizational culture, a learning culture, would be one that encourages and says, hey, yeah, ask the question. Let's find out. What if it doesn't result in anything? Then we know that's something we don't need to pursue. But what if it did? Then we pursue that.
Well, and I think you've hit it on the head there, Richard, talking about questions and the power of questions. You always do. I'm a huge fan of questions. I think questions drive the creative process. They drive curiosity. They drive smart, meaningful conversations when we ask the right questions, when we ask thoughtful questions and in a thoughtful way. And so I'm a huge fan of doing things like having a question of the month in your organization, for example, where you have everyone just focused on this one question, or a question board where people don't put up their ideas or their answers to things. They literally just put down their questions that they have about their organization.
It reminds me of that
thinking about the importance of questions, because everything starts with a smart question.
Mm-hmm.
It reminds you of that improv game where you just have to ask each other questions back and forth.
Yeah. Well, it's the whole thesis of Jeopardy, right? We give you the answers, you ask the questions, right?
Yeah. And again, there's that old saying that says the quality of your life is dependent on the quality of the questions you ask. I've always said that. Ask questions, lots of questions, smart questions, stupid questions, ridiculous questions, because sometimes your question will trigger an idea or a spark in someone else's mind, and then you'll come up with a brilliant idea. So, and Lisa pointed out that in order to be able to ask questions, you have to have that psychological safety. And if you haven't, we have an episode of every other Wednesday about creating psychological safety. But it's absolutely true, because if I'm afraid that I'll be judged, or I feel vulnerable, or I'll look like an idiot, or you're going to laugh at me, I'm less likely to ask the question. And
so important. Thank you for saying that. I was going to mention that. It's about that trust again, right? You have to come from a place of being vulnerable sometimes to ask questions. I still remember this. I was 23 years old, 22 years old, and I was in a group setting in my company, and I asked a question, and just to your point, Sanjay, everybody laughed at the stupidity of my question because they thought it was such a basic question. But for me, I didn't know. I just didn't know, but everybody laughed at me, and I thought.
You can learn when somebody asks what we might think is a stupid question. Don't punish the questioner.
It reminds me of the book, if you haven't read it, fantastic book by Patrick Lencioni called Getting Naked. And it's about being vulnerable, and he writes business books and he writes them as parables. It's actually one of my favorites of his.
I bought that book. I was a little disappointed because the title was a little misleading. I thought it was going to go in a different direction.
Yeah. Was it in a brown cover? Was it at the top shelf?
Yes, it was. Maybe we're talking about a different
wrong book. This is the one by Lencioni, Mike.
Oh.
Yeah. I love I love the chat. This is just great. We should just shut up and just let the chat go on. First of all, we do have to make sure everybody is able to learn what the reference to Anakin Skywalker is. Not everybody knows who that is. Carol, I just love Carol. I love Carol. Carol is such an addition to our audience every week. And she says, I'm probably the only one who has never seen any Star Wars movies. Can you make Legally Blonde references? Well, thank you, Carol. And Elaine does not know who Anakin Skywalker is. But so Anakin Skywalker was from Star Wars. And Sanjay, just real quickly, the reason that's a good analogy, because somebody said, yeah, it's a great analogy.
So anyway, Anakin Skywalker was supposed to be the great equalizer in the Force. He was supposed to be this powerful Jedi, but instead he went to the dark side and became the bad guy. And I'm sure everyone knows a worker, an employee, a peer that's they had the potential to be a great asset to the company, and it ended up being a big slug and a suckage of time and energy. And so a lot of people have that they come to that fork and they go, hey, I can give it my all and create tons of values for this organization and its clients, or I can be a life sucker and a leech and a parasite and get my paycheck and go home. And so that's why I call it the ASS, the Anakin Skywalker syndrome.
So
that's your nerd cred.
By the way, sorry, I wanted to point this out to what Michael was talking about in terms of asking questions, which again, I'm a huge proponent of that. I love asking questions, but it doesn't even necessarily have to be asking questions for the sake of business. You can build curiosity by drawing parallels. For example, something as silly, and I don't know if it's politically correct to say that anymore, but too bad. We can do whatever we want here. Having a secret Santa. Right? Because it builds curiosity. It's like, who's got my name? Do you have my name? I'm going to try to ask you questions and find out what you want, because I only have $9 to spend. And I don't know if you want gummy bears or wine gums. For my American friends, you want to learn what wine gums are. Anyways, those kind of silly little games, or, guess my middle name, or guess how many communities are in the jar.
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah, we build curiosity in a lot of ways. I'm a huge fan of. Some of my clients do this, some companies do this, and I think it's a great idea. They go on idea, for lack of a better term, I call them idea scavenger hunts, where teams literally go out into the community. Sometimes they have a set budget to actually go and experience some different things with some money, different customer service experiences, but they go into different businesses. So they don't just go into their competitors necessarily. They just go and wander around their town on a kind of scavenger hunt, and with a curious mindset to see what they notice, what works, what ideas jump out at them going into business, what customer service, what customer experience things they notice, and then they come back and they have a debriefing. And I think that's a really cool idea to curiosity.
I was actually part of a brainstorm, and I don't remember who it was. It was either Trident or Pepsi, one of these, and this was probably 20, 25 years ago, and they were trying to feel out a new product, and they wanted this brainstorming group. And that was a precursor to the brainstorming session. They made us do a scavenger hunt in the city. And there was like all these little things. And one of the things that I remember that was on the list was you had to go and purchase an item for exactly, and they give us a number, including tax. So you had to find out to the penny what it was. But they were just trying to get you thinking differently, interacting with people, and getting into a mental state that you're going to be more receptive to new ideas and going down different paths. So the more we can create, that again comes to the psychological safety. The more we can do that and have fun, and have people roll down their shoulders and drop their shoulders and go, all right, this may be a dumb question, but I'm still going to ask it because I know that even if you think it's silly, you're going to respect me and you're going to give me a legit answer.
That's right. And as somebody has pointed out on the chat, Michael, especially with your example, there were probably 3 other people in the room who had the question who are awfully glad you were the idiot who asked it, because otherwise they would have been the idiot who asked it, because they had these questions too. What do you think about this for an idea? I've worked with organizations that I would say are learning organizations, and it's not always necessarily about classroom training. One example was a company that made hospital products, and their employee engagement was low, their turnover was high, and we started asking them about, what is it that you do? And they just talked about putting pieces of plastic together. And instead, this company put everybody on a bus and took them to the closest hospital. There they saw the things that they had been making with their own hands being used to save lives. That fundamentally changed everyone's idea about what they did. Is that an example of learning in an organization?
Sure, absolutely. And it's so important, as we've talked about so many times here, connecting people to the sense of purpose, to the final results, the final goals, to the impact downstream that they're making. And that's huge.
Yeah. You can tell them all day long, but that won't have the impact. Go ahead, Sanjay.
And sometimes too,
before I forget, and I might.
And sometimes it's not even necessarily from the highest level. It can just be a little piece, because you're told you're making these widgets, you have to make sure they're this wide. And they don't understand what this wide means. But if you all of a sudden cross-train them and you go, okay, you're working in this part of the factory, we're going to put you to this part where you get that piece. All of a sudden they go, oh, it has to be that wide. I get it. And that's not a formal training. That's just exposure and a change of perception.
That's right.
Hey, so folks, on that note, on another sort of side topic, what do people think about even getting training, getting education, getting learning on things that do not relate to your job? I write about this in this fabulous book called The Humor Advantage. I talk, for example, about
Is that by Patrick Lencioni as well?
It is not. It's from some other guy, almost as
way better looking. Way better.
Pixar Studios has its very own Pixar University, and any employee who works for Pixar can take up to 4 hours of classes each week, and they can do it in all sorts of different topics. They can do it in health-related topics and different arts. Like, it doesn't have to pertain exactly to their job, because Pixar believes that helps foster innovation, creativity. It engages employees, it bonds people together, it sparks curiosity, all that stuff. Another example.
Before you go on, let me ask you a question about that. Put your finger there in the book. So do you think that that kind of education, that kind of learning helps people not only learn the facts, but does it help people to learn? Because, I've talked with a lot of people who are in college who say, well, I went to college for 4 years or 6 years or 8 years, and I didn't use anything that I learned in college. And I don't believe that is true. I mean, even with my own kids, I've said, but going through that process helped you to learn. It helps you figure out how to learn. And I think in an organization, if you help people have learning experiences, it helps them to learn what they need to learn.
And that's a good point too. We sometimes have to, I think, provide training and help people understand how to learn.
Yeah.
I think that's what a degree
I need to learn how to speak, how to learn better.
It's mucher. It's way gooder.
I think
but a degree doesn't say you know anything. A degree says you're teachable. In fact, a degree says more than you're teachable, says I'm learnable. I can learn this, because no matter almost whatever degree you do, even if you do something specialist, like I have my undergrads in engineering, my friends that became engineers, right? 95% of what they learned, they never used again. But the 5%, they went a heck of a lot deeper. So basically most of what you're going to learn in your undergraduate degree is garbage. It's useless. But it expands your brains and it creates pathways, neural connections that allow you to go, oh, if I don't know the answer, I know this is how to get it, or I know this is how to learn. And again, it's not the information as much as it is the act of being aware enough and confident enough to go, if I don't know the answer, I can figure it out, or I can learn it, or this isn't beyond me. I can get retrained.
Yeah. So
Like,
quickly before I lose this thread, though, the other example I have, because I love this because it's just so out there.
It's
This
just
UK company, and their name is What If? And isn't that an awesome question we need to ask more in our workplaces?
Half of life is if.
Yeah, and they provide training for employees in things like trapeze lessons and tree planting and exotic dance lessons. And again, they do that because they firmly believe that even though those have nothing to do directly with their jobs, it helps them just expand their minds. It helps them see things in a different way. And again, it sparks curiosity in general. I think that's pretty cool.
Thinking about other examples. So I've done some work in the premium automotive world. And, you know, one of the difficulties with people who work in luxury car sales is they may not live a luxury life themselves. And so the question is, how do you teach someone what a luxury experience is like if they're, and this is nothing at all pejorative about these people. This is just, most people don't live at, you know, kind of at this level. And so one of the things that we do is to recommend that in the dealerships that they take a group out to the fanciest place in town for lunch and let them have a luxury experience and to see the sir and the ma'am and the white tablecloth and how some of the nice touches. Yeah, which fork do I use? Those kinds of things, the nice touches. And they come back with a real better understanding, I should say, of what that looks like, and they can then do their job better. I think we can apply that example to a lot of things. Many people are in jobs that they don't experience what their customers do, but if we can teach them, now we could sit them in a classroom and say, now, class, you need to say sir and ma'am and be nice and make sure your fingernails are clean and all of this, and serve them fancy cappuccino, not just a cardboard cup of coffee. But when they experience it, and I think that's a learning process, then they can apply it better.
Well, and doesn't that speak volumes too about the need to do things like job swap days where people either shadow or go into other positions of their experience, and especially for senior leaders, to go down to the front lines, to spend a day on the factory floor, on the front line, interacting with customers. And boy, that's a learning experience for a lot of senior leaders.
Yeah.
And to your point, Richard, I think Zappos is one of those great companies that I believe they still do this, where no matter what your position is, ultimately at Zappos, after their onboarding, you are required to work on a front customer service line to experience their customers and that role before you go into your job.
How else can you be effective in what you do? Yeah.
What was that show that?
Yes, last year they are still doing it, and it's brilliant. Say that again, Sanjay.
I was saying, what was that show that did that? It was like my.
I was just going to say, what was Boss something?
Yeah,
like Undercover Boss.
Undercover Boss. Yeah. So I actually saw an episode of that, and it was the CEO of TaylorMade, which is they make golf clubs and such, and golf shoes, and he went undercover, and a few people thought they might have recognized him, whatever. But what was amazing is he saw that whenever there was a little fault, a little flaw in their shoes or whatever, they would literally throw dozens of shoes in the garbage. And he was like, well, why don't we just give them away, give them to charity, do something? Like, these are, 99% good. And just, again, that to me is learning. He didn't have to go through a course, and just by being on the front line and having that appreciation from that different perspective opens up a whole new world.
What about the whole notion too, gentlemen, and chat mammals, of that old notion, that old saying about how the most effective way to learn anything is to teach it, right? To become the teacher, to become the trainer, and talk about a way of engaging employees when you nurture employees to become your trainers, your coaches, your mentors. to teach fellow employees. I'm a big fan, for example, I've shared this idea with my clients for years of doing just munch and learns. So just little bite-sized training. So instead of lunch and learns, munch and learns over a coffee break, where you get employees stepping up and just presenting something, and sometimes not, again, related directly to their job. It could be a personal interest that they have, maybe fly fishing, whatever it may be, just to engage everybody and encourage them to step up in that role of being.
Is that the same, like that kind of peer learning? Is that kind of the same as the beatings will continue till the morale improves? Is that along the same lines?
I don't see the connection.
I don't see the connection there. Yeah, no. Yeah. Even things like people learning another language, even if they don't need to speak that language at work, or other times they do need to speak that language at work, and they speak English, but anybody who speaks a language as their mother tongue knows there's some nuances, and you can help somebody who speaks English or whatever language as an additional language, some of those kinds of things. And that can be done in a formal setting, an informal setting. And that does, although it may not look like it's something for their job, it is, yeah.
And again, it's the pathways in the brain is really what it is. It's about the learning to learn. It's not, I mean, what you're learning to me is secondary. The fact that you're learning is primary. And because again, it opens up those neural pathways.
Right. So then how does that help the organization if you have people who are learning a lot of stuff? I mean, it sounds obvious, but let's articulate it.
Stress level goes down, job satisfaction goes up, people become more productive, they're more efficient, they're more effective, they're making more money, but other than that, nothing.
Other than that, nothing. Yeah, but
they're happier, and you're driving innovation, I would suggest, right? Yeah. You've got to develop that continuous improvement. Hey, everybody, we want your ideas. We want your 1% improvement.
And I would argue that we're banishing boredom with that. I mean, yeah, some people say, oh no, don't make me learn anything new, but I think the vast majority.
Uh-oh.
All right, let's talk about him.
He's being what? Yeah,
that
was an excellent point, Richard. Thank you.
You got to the brilliant point there, and then you froze, and now I'm sure you forgot.
The answer. Yeah, it says my internet connection is unstable. That's not the only thing. Anyway, yeah. So I'll just have to say, maybe I'll have to say that again, except I forgot. But maybe it'll show up on the recording. But I'm curious about, and if our audience knows, or you guys know, what are some organizations that we can point to as great examples of learning organizations? I mean, I've done the research and read stuff and everything too. And you see the same old tried and true. Google. Okay, yeah, we know Google's a learning organization. Let's tell us one that we don't know.
By the way, sorry, just to piggyback on the Google thing and this idea of informal learning. Now, I can't remember if it was Google or Tesla, but one of these big tech giant type people, when they were building their new headquarters, they made sure that the lunchroom was sort of in the middle of the organization, so that every time someone had to go from one point to the other, they actually had to cross through the organization. And they knew that these touch points and this interconnectivity was one of the foundations for seeding ideas and innovation. And
that was Pixar. That was Pixar, yeah.
Pixar, but I don't think Pixar is the only one that does it. I think
I'm sure not. No.
Yeah. So, but the idea again, but being that is definitely part of the learning, and it's not a formal learning process. It's this idea of how do we foster an environment where you have these collisions of networking and these collisions of ideas bouncing off one another. And it can be something as simple as how you physically set up the room. If you only have one printer and it's networked, rather than putting it in the basement, how do you put it in a way? How do you put it by the water cooler so that you get some of those interactivity and that interaction that stems the growth in the ideas?
Yeah, absolutely. So I put this in the chat box before I forget. I have an article on my site, 16, I think it might actually be 17 reasons, 16 reasons why you need to invest in employee training and development. So if you need to sell the importance of investing in more development, more training, more learning. And this can be, we haven't even touched on some of the simple things you can do, like a book club, having a library. How many of you have an actual library or resources on your intranet site that people can delve into? There's so much we can do now with online learning. I'm a huge fan of creating business book clubs, which some of my clients do, and they have great engagement and fun through business book clubs. So lots of creative ways we can bring new ideas into our organizations.
Yeah.
But we have to value it first, right?
Yeah. Don Page talks about Chick-fil-A stressing learning on the job to accomplish the purpose of the business. Yeah, absolutely. What are some other companies that we know of or that you guys know of that are good learning organizations? Now my feels like you're frozen.
Crickets.
Well, you know what though? Generally, like when it's higher in the values of the organization because they have their company name followed by the word university. Hamburger University or Disney
College.
University or
Walt Disney. Yeah.
Certainly, as we've mentioned some of them, Pixar, Zappos, but I'm trying to think of some of the more off the beaten path ones that have.
Well, what about if you don't have the resources of Pixar or Walt Disney, which is a great example, or some of these others? What if we have a lot of people on our who join us every other Wednesday. That's a ring to it, doesn't it? And who might work for organizations that don't have huge resources and deep pockets for that. What are some other ways that we can foster a learning organization, even if you don't have a university?
Well, and that's an excellent point, Richard. You don't have to spend $1 gazillion on this because a lot of it is just demonstrating your values. It's how you conduct your meetings. It's how you onboard and hire your employees. It's how you coach and mentor people. That stuff doesn't cost you any extra money. It's an investment of time, and it's an attitude, approach, and mindset based. So there's lots of things like that, and then there's lots of simpler ways, like we've talked about, doing things like field trips, scavenger hunts.
Look at Stephen. You can always count on Stephen to have a great question. And here's a great question from me. It says, what do you three do to keep learning? You're small companies. Yeah, we are. And my first answer for that is I have been for more than 30 years a member of the National Speakers Association. I have never missed a National Speakers Association annual conference in the 30 years that I've been a member, except for I didn't even miss the one that they had only virtually. And people sometimes ask, so what was the best thing you learned at the convention this year? And I don't even look at it that way. Here's what I say. I've been running a speaking business for almost 30 years. I could not run my business if I did not take advantage of the learning opportunities offered by the National Speakers Association. This is not a plug for NSA. You guys are members of National Speakers Association and CAPS, the Canadian Association of Professional Speakers. And so I think what that says is almost everybody has a professional association or some organization that provides that. And I don't look at it in a transactional way. What thing can I get out of it this time?
Right.
I go to school every year, and I just try to learn more and more.
Yeah. And I'm the same way. I've, been involved in CAPS for 20 years. I'm a huge book reader, article. I have an entire bookshelf behind this door that is just overflowing with books because I just devour books, and not just related to my field. I'm a huge believer in reading things from all over the map, fiction, nonfiction, and it all helps me. I have different mentors that I've gone to, online training that I do. And to your point, Richard, but I'm for example, this year, I am the co-chair of our speaking convention that's going to happen in December. The reason I volunteered to do that as much as anything was for my own training and development, so I could learn what it's like to be on the other side of the fence, booking speakers, organizing an entire convention.
Okay.
And Sanjay's done that role a few times.
Like you, Mike. I've been a member of CAPS for over 20 years as well. And I've run the convention twice, and for that exact reason, which is what's it like to be on the other side? You got to run a 4-day event with 300 people. You got to bring in 30 speakers. What is it? I'm looking for what I'm trying to understand, and I'm selecting speakers. I want to see the other side of it, right? And then you run into divas like yourselves, and I want to not do that. But the other thing too is this is the whole the EOW thing came from. So the three of us and Jeff, the four of us have been a mastermind group for a bunch of years. And what we used to do before this pandemic-y thing, this COVID-19, have you guys heard of it? Anyone? No? What we used to do was every 6 months, we would fly to a destination somewhere in North America, and we would spend a weekend together, and we would powwow. We would kind of go around going, what do you need? How can we help? What's going on in your business?
What's working, what's not working? Yeah.
And all that sort of thing. And so it doesn't always have to be formal, informal. And even despite the fact that we can't be physically, getting together every 6 months for the last couple of years, but we still do this. When you're Mike, when you're doing new book covers, or you have an idea, we just pitch it. We have a WhatsApp group, and we will constantly throw questions out to one another to get ideas, perspective, or hey, what do you think on this? Or can you help me on that? Or do you have a good contact? So
And anybody can have a mastermind, right? You don't have
Right.
to be a private entrepreneur, a private business owner.
That's right.
You can benefit with all sorts of different masterminds and bringing in outside perspectives. The other thing I would like to add to it, one thing that I started doing, especially about 12 years ago in my business, that has kept me excited and engaged in my business and to continue the learning process, is going into companies and sitting down with presidents and CEOs and senior leaders and learning about their culture, learning about their organizations. And that has been just so inspiring for me. And I've learned from people all over the world about what's working in their companies. And I love that aspect of my job, probably more than anything else.
Yeah. I tell you, our chat audience is really getting fired up in the last 3 minutes of our show. There's some great stuff up here. I love this. Yvette says, we offer free Saturday training to learn new skills, such as, do you want to learn how to run a forklift? I love it. And then Elaine says, this is an interesting point. If you don't have your training program named like university or something like that, it won't have staying power when you have turnover in HR leadership. So that's interesting. Cool. Good. We got 3 minutes, guys. What do we want to make sure we cover?
I was about to share with you the answer to life in the universe, but we just don't have time. So
we
come
just
in next time.
Yeah. Hey, do you ever, we never did circle around to this topic of things we maybe do that are counter to our desire to be, but I want to share one just from a speaker's perspective that always drives me a little nuts. Is I'll get hired by clients and they'll say, one of our core values is continuous learning, continuous improvement. We're big into learning. We're a learning organization. And I said, great, that's awesome. So would there be an opportunity to talk about selling books? Because there's a lot of great ideas in my books that people might be able to learn from. Oh, no, we have a policy against that.
So our policy, we want to limit the learning.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I think on the opposite side of that, one thing that I think promotes learning, think about this. If you're going to some kind of, if there is a formal training, if there's training in the organization, are your leaders visible? Are they there? Are they attending? Are they participating? Or are they sending everyone else? And I think that speaks volumes in any organization.
Yeah. That's a whole other topic too. I've been saying this for years. Why do we just send the senior people to leadership training? Shouldn't everybody be getting leadership training at every level in the organization?
Yeah. Hey, guys, we have less than a minute left. What do we want to share with our group before we go?
Well, I want to share two things. First of all, I want to share that, remember, another reminder, you can bring in the Every Other Wednesday group to your organization to have a spirited conversation about topics of your choice, perhaps guest starring one or a few of your people from your organization. So reach out to us if that is of interest to you. If you have suggestions for future topics or ideas or questions that we can follow up with, always please reach out to us. We love to hear from you after the fact. And I want to announce that some of you know, and we're kind enough to say in the chat box earlier on, that my brand new website is launched. So please, it's
what it's called, Mike Kerr.
It's been released into the wild. You can get there, www.mikekerr.com. So cruise by, and in fact, well, I'll put this in the chat box properly, the next EOW. You can, if you go to my blog section, you can download a complimentary book called 99 Pandemic Pick-Me-Uppers, 99 Silver Linings, Positive Fun, Quirky News, because we all need a little bit of uplifting these days.
Oh, it's called 99 Luft Balloons.
Yeah. I was going to call it that, but I think it was taken. So yeah, I'd invite you to do that, and honestly, genuinely, and share it with the world, because I'm just want to share a little positivity because we need it these days.
Yeah.
Perfect. Oh.
Hey, thanks everybody. You always enliven and enrich our fortnight. There's that word again. So thanks to everybody. And don't forget to invite people to come along and join our group. And we'll see you when? Every other
Wednesday. Thanks, folks.
Bye.
March 23rd. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah. Bye.
Thank you, gentlemen.